Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second webinar today on July 15 coup attempt and its aftermath, its impact on Turkish foreign and security policies. Today, in our second panel, we have two important panelists. We have Cevdet Yılmaz. He is the deputy head of AK Party, responsible for foreign affairs, former minister. And we have Burhanettin Duran, the general coordinator of SETA Foundation. And I want to thank for both of our panelists. I know that today, especially the 4th anniversary of July 15 coup attempt, and they have been extremely busy. I have been following them all day through Twitter, and they had a very busy schedule. And it is right now 9 p.m. in Turkey, and they agreed to join this panel. I want to thank one more time for our panelists. And the structure of the panel will be, I will get an introductory remarks from both the minister and Professor Duran for 10 to 12 minutes. And following that, we will try to make it as interactive as possible. We will collect questions. You can, if you are following through Zoom, you can write your questions to the chat box and Q&A box. And if you are following through social media, on Twitter or YouTube, you can write your question as comments, and my assistants will collect those questions. And I will try to ask all of the questions that were directed to Mr. Minister and Professor Duran. And without further ado, let's start. Mr. Minister, your perspective, your idea about what happened on July 15 coup attempt and its aftermath in Turkish foreign policy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving this opportunity, and good evening from Ankara, from AK Party headquarters. As you have underlined, this is a very special day for us, for Turkey, and for our party, of course. This is the 4th anniversary of July 15 failed coup attempt, and we are commemorating our martyrs, 251 martyrs and thousands of injured citizens of Turkey on this very day 4 years ago. They sacrificed their lives actually for their elected government, for democracy in Turkey, and they fought with tanks and airplanes bare hand actually on the streets, and it was a legendary resistance to a military coup attempt in Turkey, which was orchestrated by Fethullah Gülen, terrorist organization, and which has failed, of course, luckily. But that was a very traumatic event for Turkey. Since then, of course, we are trying to commemorate these days, our heroes actually, and also we try not to forget these days, in order not to let it happen again actually in Turkey. Our democracy has shown its resilience actually in this period. But I do also want to emphasize that 15 July should also be put into a context actually. It is not as some individual single event actually. It should be analyzed on a historical background. Especially, we should analyze 2013 and 2016 period. I mean, 3-4 years, we have gone through various challenges, security challenges during these times. It started with Gezi events in Turkey in 2013. It continued with 1725 December coup d'etat, a different type of coup d'etat in Turkey, and also it continued with Daesh terrorist attacks in Turkey, and also PKK terrorism in Turkey. So Turkey had to deal with multiple security challenges simultaneously in this period, and we have gone through all these very critical phases, and today I can clearly say that Turkey has triumphed actually. Turkish nation has gained victory against these security threats and terrorist organizations. We dealt with PKK, Daesh. We are still fighting with them within our borders and beyond, of course, in Syria, in Iraq, in many parts of the world. We are tackling with these terrorist attacks, and we have greatly actually improved security conditions in Turkey, within Turkey, by very decisive policies. And also, of course, we have done everything to prevent another FETÖ event in Turkey. FETÖ is, of course, a special organization. It has double faces. I mean, on the one hand, this organization seems to be a very civilian, tolerant organization engaged in education and other activities. But on the other hand, we know that this organization infiltrated into security structures, judiciary, secret service, every layer of the state to achieve its objectives by every means that they can use. So we know that this is a dangerous organization. It is dangerous not only for Turkey, but also for all countries in which they operate, actually. So our experience in that sense is not just peculiar to Turkey. We should actually warn our friends that one day or another they will face similar problems in their own context. And I do believe that what their methodology is similar. I mean, what they have done in Turkey, they are doing in all countries in which they operate. On the one hand, they are doing education and other activities. And on the other hand, they are infiltrating into security structures and state structures. That is why US and any other country, I mean, should investigate their ties within their country and especially their connections to the administrative staff within their own context. Because one day or another, they will use this and they will destabilize these countries and harm their democracies. I should also emphasize that on this day, we are, I am sorry to say this, but Turkey could not get enough support from other democracies in this very legendary fight against democracy. We have sacrificed our lives for democracy, and we have tackled with very serious security threats that has endangered our democracy and our very existence in this part of the world. But unfortunately, democracies, our allies, our Western allies, I should speak very frankly, they didn't do what they are supposed to do as democracies. We couldn't see this solidarity among democracies in our case, and that was a very big disappointment for Turkey actually in its relations with US and some other democracies. At this very night, we couldn't see very strong statements and denials for this coup d'etat organizers, and in the following period, we didn't see the solidarity in fighting with this organization all over the world. Still, there are some countries who are giving protection to this terrorist organization, and we believe that it is also not good for their democracies and for our relations, actually. I should also sincerely state that after this event, anti-Western, anti-US feelings, sentiments among Turkish population has increased to a great extent, and with very, real reasons, and we should work on this together. Turkey is part of NATO. Turkey is still have this strategic goal of becoming a member to the European Union, but unfortunately, this lack of solidarity with Turkish democracy and Turkish nation, and this indifference to the security challenges of Turkey has created a different atmosphere within Turkey, and we have to deal with it together with our friends in the Western world. Unfortunately, so far, we still have this problem, and we should discuss it together. And that has created a new atmosphere for our foreign policy. In this post-July 15 era, actually, we have emphasized more independence in our foreign policy. We tried to develop multiple ties. That was our general policy, but it has accelerated, actually, in the aftermath of the July 15. We didn't harm our relations. We tried to keep our relations with the Western world, but we tried to develop other connections with the rest of the world as well. And also in this period, actually, Turkey has become more active in its foreign policy, contrary to the expectations. After eliminating these terrorist elements within our state structures, Turkish army, security forces become much more active actually, and we made serious developments in our defense technologies, and also, I mean, cross-border and cross-border operations. We believe that FETÖ organization has hindered Turkey and reduced its potentiality in foreign policy. After eliminating this obstacle within our state structures, we have become much stronger indeed, much effective in our foreign policy instruments, and we have projected our power in the regions that we consider to be very important for Turkey. I have already finalized my time, so I will leave here. Maybe we can continue with questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We will come back to you with more specific questions on Turkish foreign policy. Professor Duran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kılıç. First, I'd like to express that I'm very glad to talk about Turkey's foreign policy, security policies after July 15 coup attempt, because this is a great day. Today is a great day for us. You know, our nation has triumphed over the plotters, over the coup d'etat planners that will eradicate Turkey's democracy, Turkish state. And our people went to the streets after our president called them to save democracy, to save their homeland, their fatherland, and their country. So this is a great day for our democracy, and we are very thankful to our people that gave their life to protect our democracy. So before talking about Turkey's foreign policy objectives or orientation, because I know that there are many discussions, polemics on that. As Mr. Cevdet Yılmaz underlined, I also want to emphasize one significant point, that we were very disappointed by the reactions coming from Washington and other European capitals, other capitals of the democracies on that night, on the night of July 15. For example, the then Secretary Kerry stated that the US is in favor of peace, stability, and continuity in foreign policy in Turkey. That was not expected at that night from Washington. And NATO ally Turkey was experiencing a critical night, and there were two sides. One side coup attempt, the other side is people for democracy, people struggling for democracy. This created an atmosphere in the Turkish public opinion that the US is not ally, is not a friend. Even on the contrary, people felt something hostile to Turkey. And what happened after the July 15 coup attempt in the relations, in the bilateral relations between Turkey and US should be seen in this light. And actually, I am very unhappy to say that what happened after the coup attempt did not help to better our relations. On the contrary, because of the Syrian civil war and because of the Washington's wrong policy, misguided policy, Washington, Trump, first Obama administration and later Trump administration armed YPG, a terrorist organization. And at the same time, Fethullah Gülen, the leader of this terrorist organization, was not extradited to Turkey. So that was a very critical moment in reshaping, reimagining, rethinking our relationship, our understanding of allied. What is the meaning of ally? What is the meaning of alliance? If there was a national security consideration, it was very vital to Turkey. What would be the reaction of other democracies? Certainly, it should be not in that way. It should be in a way of protecting Turkish democracy. So this is very clear starting point to understand Turkey's orientation in the last 4 years. Another point, which is related to Turkey's foreign policy, is the recognition of the people and at the same time the political elite that Turkey is in need of self-help, is in the position of self-help. Yes, there were many problems stemming from the regional turbulence in the surrounding of Turkey, and Syrian civil war, Iraq, and refugee issues, and terrorist organizations. But what is very clear to Turkish people, Turkey should try to address to these problems by its independent decision, independent will, because other allies, other friends, even their democracies, would not help, even in the case of a terrorist organization of PKK or YPG, that they recognize that it is a terrorist organization. They armed this organization. So this led to Turkey to face the problems challenging Turkish foreign policy in Syria, to cooperate with Russia, because since 2015, you have to face Russia in Syria. And the US did nothing to prevent this. And at the same time, this turbulence that affected us later was the same phenomena for the entire world. With the Trump administration, we have seen that the US started to rethink its global role. And this is very clear, very apparent just in the course of this COVID-19 pandemic era. So US is shifting its orientation from the Middle East to the Pacific, and this creates a critical void in the region, and Turkey is one of them to fill this void. This is not because of any imperialism or any neo-Ottomanism or any Islamism. This is just a necessity to keep your national interests, to save your national interests, and to struggle with the terrors and chaos in the region. Turkey, with its very strong connections with NATO and EU, is the beacon of this region, and is the source of stability in the region. So that's why Turkey is trying to achieve two things together. One is trying to keep national interests, national security interests alive and consolidated, and at the same time try to cooperate with allies from the US and Europe. But we can say that still there are many tensions and critical tensions between Turkey and US, between Turkey and EU. Yes, this is true, because Turkey's foreign policy orientation is being transformed in some way. Certainly Turkey is trying to be more active because of the necessity that I have tried to underline until now. And that is the necessity, and you have to be an active in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in North Africa, in order to keep your country safe and well consolidated. And we have seen that this merge of regional turbulence with global turbulence, Turkey is trying to create more options and diplomatic options, of course, to cooperate with all the global worlds, global powers, but at the same time, of course, trying to cooperate with allies. You have to make this together, and the base for your foreign policy orientation is to keep your national will and national interests. And of course, I'm aware of the fact that some of the capitals, Western capitals, are not happy with what Turkey is trying to do. But if you look at from the perspective of the night of this July 15, you will understand that Turkey doesn't have so much options in order to live properly in this turbulent era and in this turbulent global period. And these are the main topic, the main points that I want to underline in the first round.
Thank you very much, Professor Duran. And those who are on our Zoom or in following us on social media, they can start writing their questions. I have some general questions about the Turkish foreign policy in the aftermath of the July 15 coup attempt. And both of our panelists mentioned the relation with the United States. And we know that at the public level and the governmental level, there is a big disappointment about the way that US reacted, especially in the first hours of the July 15 coup attempt. And then there is another set of disappointment in regards to Turkey's requests from the United States in regards to July 15 coup attempt. There is all sorts of scenarios for the future of Turkish-American relations. Mr. Minister, would you consider yourself an optimist or a pessimist for the future of Turkish-American relations? What are the main expectations of Turkey from the United States, and how do you see the future of the relations between two countries?
Actually, I would like to be realist rather than pessimist. There are pluses and minuses, of course. We have to be, as I said in my introductory remarks, we have to be frank. We had problems with US, and there are a number of problems. They are unfortunately accumulated over time rather than, decreasing and resolving these problems with mutual engagement. We have to reverse this downward spiral in our relations. We have to make it an upward spiral. I am aware of the fact that we cannot solve all the problems all at once, actually. We have to be realistic, but we have to do something about these problems. We should stop this downward spiral in our relations. Otherwise, one problem will lead to another problem, and that will make the picture even more complicated. That's why we have to focus on our common interests and common values. There are common interests between Turkey and US, and there are common values. But unfortunately, in recent years, we cannot see this discussion, diplomacy, negotiation around common interests and common values, but rather there is some media images, populist discourse, and some narrow actions that harms our relations. And it doesn't only harm the interest of Turkey, it also harms the interest of US, especially in our region. For example, I mean, the connection between, the very open, actually, connection between US and PYD. PYD is an offshoot of PKK, which is considered as a terrorist organization, not only by Turkey, but also by US and Europe and all the rest. But unfortunately, United States have preferred to work with this terrorist organization to fight with another terrorist organization, which is ISIL or Daesh. We have repeatedly actually said that we should work together as states to fight against terrorism rather than use one terrorist organization against another, because that may provide you some short results, but in the medium and long term, that will produce its own problems, actually. So what we are proposing, that is just an example, actually. We should work together with our counterparts in US to about S-400s, about PYD, about fateful, and about other issues in the Middle East and beyond. We have, if we could work together with US, I believe it will be beneficial for both parties as states, as very important actors in our region. So what I would say, we should be realistic. There are problems, and these problems have accumulated, unfortunately, over time, rather than resolved among us. And we should start with certain problems and create a more positive atmosphere between Turkey and US, and especially this actions against terrorist organization by US towards FETÖ and PYD would help a lot in these relations, and we will be in a very different position. I should also emphasize that sometimes some friends from US, they say that, why don't you have similar feelings for some other countries? I would rather argue that our expectation is higher when it is US that under discussion, because we have a long friendship actually. We have a long alliance with US in NATO, and we have been working together in different parts of the world, from Balkans to Afghanistan. And now when you see a negative development from a friend, that affects you much more than what you will feel when it is someone else. So these expectations also creates another atmosphere. We should generate a more positive agenda. Mr. Erdogan, our president, and Mr. Trump, they have established a good relation at the leaders level, but we should increase the channels of communication. I do believe that we should increase it between parliaments, for example. Unfortunately, parliaments are more affected by populist atmosphere. We should increase direct communication, not through media or international media, but direct communication lines between parliaments, US Congress and Turkish Grand National Assembly. We should encourage civil society, private sector, business to engage with each other, and we should increase the programs like the one we are just having between different parties, and we should speak more, actually. We should have more dialogue, and I believe with this process, we will have much better relations, and it will be in our interest and in the interest of the US as an ally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Just want to follow up with another question. You mentioned a lot of problems, and those who are more pessimist about the future of Turkish-American relations mentioned the extent of the problems that includes from the Halkbank issue to S-400, F-35, PYD issue, etc. So which of these problems can be resolved more easily? So if you want to start from a low-hanging fruit actually to resolve these problems, and if you pick one of those problems that would be much more easier to resolve, which one would you pick?
I mean, every problem is important in its own context, of course, but this fight against terrorism is quite critical in my assessment, and also economic issues. Actually, we can start from cooperating more on terrorism and also cooperating more on economic issues, especially after this COVID-19. The economy is #1 priority for Turkish people, for American people, for the whole world indeed. And there is a clear common interest between Turkey and US to focus on commerce, trade, especially considering this, I mean, diversification of procurement from China to rest of the world and other policy objectives that is stated by the US administration. I believe there is a good opportunity to focus on economic issues and to further develop our investments and trade relations. That will also generate an atmosphere to focus on other more political issues, let's say. But economy is very, very critical in my understanding. And as I said, it is much easier to focus on common interests when it is economy. The second one would be, as I said, security issues, especially the common fight against terrorism.
Thank you very much. And when we look actually the readouts from the phone calls between President Trump and President Erdogan, probably the most consistent theme in all of those readouts have been increasing the trade volume and that goal that two leaders had put for $100 billion trade volume. Professor Duran, another question to you. I will ask the same question actually, but before that, I want to ask you the question that was mostly asked in the immediate aftermath of July 15 coup attempt. In this town, most of the analysis focused on the state of Turkish military in the aftermath of July 15 coup attempt, and there were some question marks actually for the capability and capacity of the Turkish military, and let alone the cross-border operations. There were questions if Turkish military is capable of protecting the Turkey's national security at that point. What happened since then, and how would you evaluate the 4-year period in Turkey's security policy?
Well, Kılıç, it is reasonable to question the efficiency of Turkish army after seeing that this FETÖ organization, FETÖ members infiltrated into state level, state institutions to the extent that there were many people at the critical points. So this, of course, affected negatively Turkey's fight with terrorism, including Daesh, PKK in Syria. But if you look at closely what happened after this coup attempt failed, actually was the Turkish army became more effective, became strong in terms of capacity, in terms of conducting efficient operations in Syria. Just after the coup attempt, Turkey conducted 3 operations in Syria to fight with Daesh first, and later to fight with the PKK 2 times. And at the same time, now in Idlib, Turkey is making operations against other radical organizations to keep Syrian people, Syrian refugees there for humanitarian purposes and for the purposes of Turkish national security considerations. So if you look at from this angle, you will realize that Turkish state institutions have been strengthened by the fight against this FETÖ organization. By eliminating them from critical state institutions, this provided us more effective institutions, more effective army, more effective police, and more effective judiciary. So this is very clear from the point of Turkish people. And I believe that our friends in Washington or in other capitals should realize this. I can give another example. In the last months, we are talking about Turkey's activism, new activism in Eastern Mediterranean and in Libya. You know, Turkey, by supporting Sarraj government, the UN-backed Sarraj government, changed the course of the civil war in Libya. And this created a new balance. Even General Haftar was on the brink of all total failure. This is because of Turkey's involvement in Libya, and because of Turkish drones, because of Turkish military capabilities. So not just fighting with terrorist organizations in Syria and in Iraq, beyond that, Turkey is successfully operating in Libya. These are all signs of Turkish military, new Turkish military capability after the failure of this coup attempt.
Another related question to this, actually, that we are receiving, and especially after the Libya operation, in fact, starting from the Euphrates Shield, Afrin operation, Idlib, and the operation on the east of Euphrates, there was this constant question about if Turkey is overstretching militarily in the region. And especially in Libya operation, we had that question again. And I'm receiving some question in regards to that. Do you think, how would you respond to the claims or the questions that Turkey is overstretching militarily in the region?
Yeah, Kılıç, I'm reading this kind of interpretations in the media. And of course, we have to be careful, as Turkey, we have to be careful about overstretching. We know that many global powers, including the US as superpower, overstretched in the Middle East and in other parts of the world. And the Iraqi invasion of Afghanistan were not successful and were costly to American people and American treasury. So each power should be careful about entering and exiting any other country. But from the Turkish point, if you look at, this is not an adventurism, because the countries that are Turkey is considering activism and military presence, these countries are very tied to Turkish national security interests. This is not just economic adventurism, or this is not about this is not about the desire to be more influential in all parts of the world. These are very critical countries. What are they? Syria, Iraq, Eastern Mediterranean, and Libya. These are very tied to Turkey's maritime interests as well. For example, Libya, Turkey, issued a memorandum, two memorandum with Libya related to delimitation of maritime zones in the Eastern Mediterranean basin. And this is very related to Turkey's security interests in terms of sea and maritime. So these are not adventurism. So yes, about capacity, about effectiveness, and about the implications of long-term involvement in these countries are very critical. And Turkey has to plan this in Syria. It's not easy to stabilize and to institutionalize peace and stability there. Even this is the same thing in Libya. And that's why I know that Turkey is preparing for a comprehensive policy in Libya, not just militarily involved, but also supporting public utilities there. This is very critical, and from security reform to investment to energy, in each field, Turkey is trying to help the UN-backed Sarraj government to keep Libya united. And this should be, of course, merged with diplomacy. Turkey is in favor of diplomacy, not just in Syria, but also in Libya as well, in Eastern Mediterranean as well. But what is critical here, Turkey is also ready to put some military power, to put some hard power to realize its national interests. If there is no diplomacy, if there is no option for diplomacy, Turkey is the last power who is trying to project power in terms of military in all these fields. For example, in Syria, Turkey is the last country who intervened in Syria militarily. Even this is the longest border for our country. It is the same in Iraq, it is the same in Eastern Mediterranean, and even it is the same in Libya. And we hope that this could be done by a cooperation with our friends like the US, like Italy, like Germany in Libya. And it is the same for European Union to realize that the only case, the only interest is not the maximalist interest of Greece or Southern Cyprus. There should be a fair delimitation of maritime zones, and they should work with us to solve this problem, to tackle this problem. If that is done, then I believe that Europe will be stronger, even Greece will be more prospered, there will be more prosperity for them and peace, of course. So Turkey's efforts for diplomacy, I believe, if they are met with sincere reciprocal reactions, then this will help to stabilize our region as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Duran. Mr. Minister, we are receiving some questions about Russia, and Turkey-Russia relation, especially in Washington, D.C., have been followed closely. And for a long time, actually, right now, for almost 2 decades, with the improvement of Turkey's relations with Russia, there was constant concern about this improving relations. Sometimes it was some concerns about the shift of access in quote, and sometimes it was Turkey turning away from the West. There was this constant concerns, and especially after S-400 and Astana process, now these concerns start to be expressed more openly and more strongly in Washington, D.C. and in some other Western capitals as well. What is the state of Turkey's relations with Russia? There is economic relations, there is strategic, is it becoming a much more strategic relations, and what is the state right now?
Kılıç, thank you for asking this question. I am also seeing this question when I go to European countries, and people are really very much interested, and some people are concerned about this relationship. But first of all, Turkey and Russia are neighbors, and it is so natural that neighbors should get along with each other. I mean, we have a very big trade with Russia, almost $30 billion US. Last year, around 7 million Russian tourists have visited Turkey, quite a number. I believe they are now #1 in terms of tourism. They are even past German tourists in Turkey. And we have energy relations and many other relations with Russia that are mutually beneficial between neighbors. So it is quite natural that we have good neighborly relations with Russia. Coming to the political issues, especially to Syria and Libya, we are actually on different sides of the fight in Syria and Libya. I mean, we are not defending the similar positions. But what we are achieving with Russia is a constructive dialogue, a diplomacy to resolve the problems. We are very realistically coming together and trying to resolve the problems. And this constructive dialogue between Russia and Turkey happens at the leaders level, of course, between Mr. Putin and Mr. Erdogan, and also among foreign ministers and different layers of the administration. And that is quite positive. It is not only positive for Turkey and Russia, it is also positive for our European and Western friends indeed. I mean, this relationship produces some sort of a stability in our region. For example, without this relationship, we couldn't contain the problems in Syria, for example. The refugee issue would have been much worse, actually, without a constructive engagement between Turkey and Russia, and by the way, with Iran, of course, in this specific case. So this relationship should not be seen by our Western allies as a liability. It should be seen as an asset, actually. I mean, Turkey is in between 3 continents, and Turkey has multiple ties with the rest of Europe, with Asia, with Africa, with many parts of the world, with Middle East, Balkans, Central Asia. Turkey has historically very good ties with the different parts of the world. And if our friends in Western world could understand Turkey's specific geography and history and its political potential, that could be seen as an asset, actually, for our allies rather than a liability. They should understand that Turkey is not a small country within Europe that can isolate itself from some rest of the world and just engage with neighbors. We have a different history and geography. And these relations between Turkey and Russia, for example, produced this Astana process for Syria, which is indeed a process that supports UN-led Geneva process. It is not an alternative to Geneva process. It actually gives substance to Geneva process. We have achieved relative stability in Syria. We have brought different actors together, and we have established this constitutional committee for designing a new political setup for Syria, and that has been under the auspices of UN in Geneva. It continues with this political process. What I am trying to say, Russia should not be seen as an alternative to our relations with West, but Russia is a very important neighbor and partner for Turkey. We have multiple ties. We have our disagreements, but we have also diplomacy and constructive engagement between Turkey and Russia, and that is not something to be criticized. That is indeed a positive element for resolving real issues on the ground, like Syria and Libya.
Thank you very much. And for Professor Duran, there is a question for you. The question is how Professor Duran considers the possible cooperation with the US in Libya in the context of fighting with radicals and limiting Russian influence?
It's a good question. First, we should understand what kind of policy Washington has towards Libya. Actually, this is vague in terms of Trump administration's orientation towards Libya. But I understand that they are not happy with the Russian influence in Libya, and with the possible increase of Russian military involvement in Libya would change the geopolitical considerations in the North Africa. If, supporting General Haftar and uniting around France, Greece, Egypt, and the Emirates, calculations over Libya would empower more and more Russia in Libya and in the North Africa. And I know that Washington is not happy with that. And actually, Turkey as a NATO ally would not consider something desirable, the Russian growing military involvement in Libya. Because of security reasons for Europe, this is the southern branch of NATO. This is very problematic. And I believe that there can be diplomatic initiatives to make Haftar back from Sirte and Jufra, and then there can be a discussion of ceasefire, and this may lead to political solution, because we know that there is no military solution in Libya. In order to enforce a political solution, there has to be a strong initiative of diplomacy. If the US and Turkey cooperate on that, including Germany and Italy, all of these diplomatic initiatives would balance France and Greece, and that will ease the diplomacy, the political solution in Libya.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, there is another question. This is for you about Turkey's relation with Israel and its policy on Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
You know, Turkey's position is very clear. I mean, we are always defending the rights of Palestinian people. We believe that they should have their rights that have been also acknowledged by UN, various UN decisions. But unfortunately, they are being denied with their rights by Israeli administrations. We believe two-state solution in our region. We believe that Jerusalem should not be a homogeneous city. I mean, it is against the nature of Jerusalem. Actually, for centuries, our ancestors have ruled Jerusalem, and it has been hosting all religions, all Abrahamic religions in itself, and it has this heterogeneity in itself. And unfortunately, in recent years, we are seeing this tendency to make Jerusalem as an homogeneous Jewish capital. And that is not in line with the spirit of Jerusalem. We should see, we would like to have a Palestinian state with Eastern Jerusalem being its capital, and with a viable, of course, Palestinian state. But unfortunately, in recent periods, we have seen that under certain populist moments, and also with an opportunistic approach, considering the weakness of neighboring countries, there are some politicians that are trying to take advantage of this conjuncture. But I do believe that such approaches are short-lived. They are short-sighted. If Israel wants to have stability in the long term, and they should work with Turkey and the rest of the region, and they should acknowledge the legitimate rights of Palestinian people. Actually, the peace plan that has been declared in US is not a peace plan. It is just a one-sided design that imposes unacceptable statements about Jerusalem and about the rights of Palestinian people. Turkey will continue to defend the rights of Palestinian people, which are under occupation and which has denied their basic human rights, actually. So we will continue to defend Palestinian people. We will continue to defend Jerusalem as a city that will host different religions in an atmosphere of tolerance and with coexistence, and we will defend two-state solution. And we will do everything we can in every international platform to defend these rights.
Do you expect, Mr. Minister, do you expect this issue to be a major problem or challenge between Turkish-American relations as well?
We know that there are lobbies in Washington, of course, that may harm some of our efforts in Washington or in international media. But this issue is beyond such considerations for Turkey. Turkey will continue to support Palestinians. And we do believe that Jewish people with an understanding for human rights and for principles for international law, respect to international law, they should also support this effort of Turkey and others for a peace, a real peace, a sustainable peace for our region. Other than that, I mean, with populism, with short-sighted policies, with the populist politicians trying to take the advantage of current political situation in the region, there cannot be any long-lived solution to these problems. If we would like to see a long-lasting solution, we should be fair. We should have justice, actually. Otherwise, we should have a balanced approach. Otherwise, an unilateral approach by US administration to Israel and defend their rights will not create any benefit for anybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Professor Duran, another Libya question for you. Jeffrey Steiner asked, how could Turkey give comfort to United Arab Emirates and Egypt that Libya will not become a base for Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, we know that in the international media, Turkey is being criticized for supporting Muslim Brotherhood in Libya. And we know that Egypt and some other Gulf countries are not happy with the notion of Muslim Brotherhood being in power in any Arab country. But there is a mistake that Turkey is considered as a part of Muslim Brotherhood or as a supporter of Muslim Brotherhood. Actually, Turkey, AK Party has its own experience in Turkey in terms of Islamic considerations and the synthesis between Turkish experience of secularism. So in terms of brotherhood, these considerations are not realist considerations. They are much more ideologically oriented. What do I mean by that? There is a reality in the field. We know that Sarraj government is not pro-Muslim Brotherhood. Actually, it is a Libyan national government and composed of different parts. So there is no help in describing Sarraj government and Turkey's support as being the common denominator of Muslim Brotherhood. Well, at the same time, we know that there are some natural interests of Egypt in Libya because there is a long border. If we agree on that, there should be no room for radical parties, radical organizations, fundamentalist organizations in Libya. Actually, Turkey is much more constructive than Egypt and then Haftar, because we know that Haftar has some radical supporters. Some of them are Methali Salafi organizations. These are radical organizations. And in terms of French and European security considerations, including refugees, Turkey is the only reliable and stable actor in dealing with these issues. Turkey fought with Daesh. So actually, this is the only country that fought with Daesh by its military. So Turkey can do this, can provide in contributing to struggle with the radical organizations, if there is a diplomatic effort and a political common ground among allies, among NATO allies, and I believe that Turkey will contribute a lot to this project.
I know that we have to finish at 3 p.m., but I have a lot of questions in front of me. So if our panelists wouldn't mind, I would try to ask all of those questions. Mr. Minister, one question that has not been mentioned a lot nowadays in Turkish discussion in Turkish foreign policy, actually, at least in the West, by the observers in Western capitals, Turkey's EU relation. Somehow there is this idea that this relation is over, that there shouldn't be any realistic expectation for the positive future for the Turkey's EU relation. What is the state of Turkey's EU relation? There is constant emphasis on the Turkey's determination for full membership, but what is I know that you travel Brussels frequently, so I want to get your perspective about that.
Thank you, Kılıç. Of course, as I said in my preliminary words, we are still considering EU membership as a strategic goal for Turkey. Turkey is part of Europe. When you look at our trade, almost half of our trade is with Europe. Similar figures are there for tourism. When you look at capital movements, we are largely integrated with European capital markets. And in every way, I mean, there are millions of Turkish origin people living in Europe. Some of them are citizens of countries like Germany and other countries. So we have so many ties with Europe, and we are part of Europe indeed, considering our geography, our economy. But unfortunately, our membership process has taken very long, actually. It has started with 1950s. We have started to discuss about EU membership, and at that time it was not EU, of course, the common market, etc. But now we still continue to negotiate with Europe. That has created some kind of a fatigue, actually, on both sides, actually. But still, we are trying to generate some positive atmosphere between EU and Turkey. In recent years, due to internal problems of EU and our security problems, our relations have even worsened, actually. When you look at our relations in recent years, we have been dealing with our security problems, and Europe was dealing with its own internal issues. You know, there is Brexit and all the rest. There are very important discussions about future of Europe, etc. Rising anti-Islamism, rising, xenophobia in Europe. These are all problems within Europe, and of course, they are endangering the future of Europe. And we believe that Turkey-EU relations are quite critical for all these issues. If we could generate a positive relation between Turkey and Europe, that would be a very good signal for a new type of globalization all over the world, actually. We represent different cultures, different civilizations, but we have common values like democracy, rule of law, market economy, etc. If Europe and Turkey could generate a positive atmosphere and stronger relations, that would send a big signal to the rest of the world about a new type of global governance, actually. But unfortunately, so far, we don't see this positive atmosphere. Today, we have German presidency in EU, and that is relatively better for Turkey, actually. But unfortunately, with France, we are having some political strains on Libya, on some other issues, and especially this and some other member countries, they are not very positive. But we believe that at least we can focus on customs union and modernize the customs union between Turkey and Europe. It is a win-win situation. We have made impact analysis, actually. The Commission has made an impact analysis and Turkey has made an impact analysis. It is a win-win situation, and we have to focus again on this common interest and common values to generate a positive atmosphere. Another issue that we can work together with EU is refugee issues. Turkey has done a lot actually on refugees. Today we have 3.6 Syrian refugees in Turkey, and also we are giving service to millions of Syrian people within Syria. Without Turkey, Europe could have faced a big problem of refugee crisis in its politics and economy. Actually, with our agreement in 2015, when you look at numbers from 2015 to 2019, the number of refugees going to Europe has decreased 92% due to Turkey's efforts, basically. But today, Turkey has reached its limits, actually. We cannot shoulder all the burden of refugees alone. We are a developing country, and this is a humanitarian issue that everybody should help. So we can work with Europe and the US and other friends for this humanitarian issue, and also for political solution for Syria, of course, which would be a more radical solution for this refugee issue. So there are lots of issues that we can work together, but unfortunately, the Greeks and Greek Cypriots, they are generating also some problems in our EU-Turkey relations, and EU shows a solidarity among its members instead of defining fair position towards Turkey. When you look at the Eastern Mediterranean issues, you can see this actually. I mean, Europe is making some declarations, but Turkey is just trying to defend its internationally legitimate rights in Eastern Mediterranean. But due to membership solidarity among Greece and the rest of Europe, they are making statements which are unbalanced and unfair in our assessment. So there are issues that we have to tackle with, but there are also areas we can cooperate and generate a positive atmosphere between ourselves. This post-COVID era is a good opportunity in my understanding. COVID will not produce anything mechanically, but it creates an atmosphere for better relations. Actually, President Erdogan has done a great job to show solidarity of Turkey to the rest of the world and Europe in this fight against COVID. We have so far helped 139 countries with medical equipment, with all the support. And this new spirit of working together for common issues can be used for resolving other issues among ourselves. We expect more positive approach from Europe. In the past, actually, we have benefited from the EU atmosphere for reforms in Turkey, but unfortunately, in recent years, we are seeing a different picture. We hope that Europe should not enter into the trap of far-right or extremist groups. Europe should defend its more positive outlook for the future, and we should work together for these all issue areas.
Mr. Minister, you mentioned COVID-19 crisis, and we know that there has been talks between the EU officials, especially with German officials and Turkish officials, in regards to travel restrictions to Turkey in summer. So, can you update us about if there is any development about that?
It is still under discussion. We believe that it is not a fair decision. Turkey has been quite successful actually in its fight against coronavirus, and Turkish tourism sector is quite professional. They have taken all the necessary measures for hosting the tourists in our touristic areas, and we have generated a system of certification for touristic companies. So we believe that we are ready to serve tourists from Germany, but unfortunately we believe that it's a political assessment basically. We are still negotiating with German authorities. When we talk to German politicians, I have made several talks through Zoom with German parliamentarians. They are also complaining about this actually. They say that it is important for tourists and also for citizens that has origins in Turkey. They want to go and see their families, live with them at the summer times. So they are also supporting this idea. But so far, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany has not changed its decision. We are negotiating and we are hoping that we can find a solution for this problem.
Thank you very much. Professor Duran, there are questions about Eastern Mediterranean and there are constant questions about Libya. So when we look at the Eastern Mediterranean, there are multiple issues, I guess. Libya issue has become part of the Eastern Mediterranean issue for Turkey. And there is this energy forum that has been formed, that has been organized by the countries that do not agree with Turkey in regards to the maritime delimitation in Mediterranean Sea. What would you expect the future of Turkey's relation with these countries in the Eastern Mediterranean? Do you expect any kind of reconciliation, or do you expect a future that has more confrontation in it in regards to Eastern Mediterranean?
Certainly, I hope for reconciliation. I hope for peaceful reconciliation of different interests in the Eastern Mediterranean basin. But still, we have to be realistic because in order to bring together different national interests, you have to see from other shoes, from other one's shoes. But given the Greek maximalist claims in the Eastern Mediterranean basin, still we have time to reach a peaceful reconciliation. It means that still countries will confront each other in dealing with other countries. This is the time for seeing each other's power. Unfortunately, this is the reality. And now Greece is trying to find some allies in realizing its maximalist intentions. But I know that even Egypt is not happy with the Greece maximalist intentions in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I believe that Turkey's approach for a fair share in maritime delimitation will create a common ground, or at least a ground for some countries. And Italy is near to this. Libya is, of course, is on the same page with Turkey. And in the long run, if any relationship, bilateral relationship, could be furthered with Egypt, this would help to change the parameters in the Eastern Mediterranean. And Israel is one of the candidates to deal with this new terms or fair terms in the Eastern Mediterranean. But as we know, the US involvement in the Eastern Mediterranean and support to Greek intentions is not helping to reach to that point. And again, Russia is filling the void in the region because of this different interests, conflict of interest in the region. Russia is playing an upper hand and making himself more powerful in these parameters. So I believe that in the long run, it should be of course, fair share, and we have to reach a conciliation. But still now we are a period of both confrontation and searching for allies.
So you mentioned Russia, you mentioned Egypt in your remarks, and there's a question about this actually. It's for you. If Haftar stays in Sirte and Jufra, what will happen next? Both Russia and Egypt have called those places a red line, and the Tobruk parliament has reportedly invited Egypt to send troops.
Well, this is a critical moment, and I know that if Sirte and Jufra is in the hands of Haftar, then this is the this is the stuck position. And there is no solution to Libyan crisis. It means that military confrontations between two parties, between Haftar and Sarraj government, will continue. Because without oil, the national government, Sarraj government, cannot survive, cannot be successful in keeping the country united. And at the same time, if Haftar forces controls the Jufra and Sirte, and it means that they are controlling oil, this will encourage them to make further attacks on Tripoli. And this is, again, a military confrontation option. So I believe that the parties that are involved in the Libyan case do not want more military confrontation. If military confrontation continues, well, some countries are very decisive on that, and Turkey is one of them, because Turkey cannot leave Libya because of the vital national interests regarding Eastern Mediterranean. And I believe that if this insistence on Sirte and Jufra continue on the side of Haftar, there will be more confrontation, but at the same time, the involved parties will try to reach diplomatic solutions at the same time, because this kind of confrontation will pose a great risk to Europe.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Minister, there is a question. It says, do Gülenists still pose a threat to Turkey, internally and or externally?
Actually, we have done with the Gülenist organization to a great extent in Turkey, but we still continue that we should be careful about the remnants actually of this organization, because it is a unique organization. It is a secret organization. So it is not easy actually to deal with such an organization. It is not a transparent and open organization. You can find out the remnants of this organization in different parts of state structures in different parts of Turkey. So the struggle against this FETÖ organization will continue. But to a great extent, actually, we have been successful in fighting with Gülenist structures in Turkey. We don't think that it poses the past threat to Turkey today. I mean, we have taken serious measures against it. But of course, they also have an international network, and they still operate in different countries. We are also trying to struggle with them internationally, in international arena. In some countries, we are successful with the cooperation of the host countries, of course. But in others, unfortunately, they are still operating, and they are getting the support of some of the governments. And that is why we are urging that this is not only a threat to Turkey, it is a threat towards all the countries in which they operate. What they have done in Turkey they will do in sooner or later in the countries in which they operate. The methods they used in Turkey, they are also using them in other countries. So they should be very careful about this danger. And also I would like to emphasize that this is not a religious organization. It is a terrorist organization. For them, all means are legitimate to achieve their ends. This is not an Islamic view. I mean, if you have adopted the Islamic framework, you cannot use all means for your ends. But for this organization, there is no limit to their means, and they can use everything. And for them, everything is legitimate to achieve their objectives. And this is dangerous. This is unethical and also illegal organization. And we should be very careful about this. We, as a friend and as a country that has gone through such painful processes, we are just giving our friendly advice to all the rest of the world to be very careful about this organization.
Thank you very much. Professor Duran, when I look at the questions, I'm receiving some questions about Somalia, and I'm receiving questions about Libya. So if this panel was probably last year, the most significant focus of the discussion would be Middle East, Turkey's relations with Iran, Turkey's relations with Iraq or Syria. But now we are receiving questions about Africa. And it was 2 weeks ago, I guess, Senator Graham had another webinar, and in his remarks, he mentioned that Turkey's relations with United States in Africa will be key for the future. One of the key points, key pillars, can be a key pillar for the future of Turkey's American relations. Do you see a bright, let's say, a more positive set of developments in Africa that would be positive for the Turkish-American relations?
A good question. We have to be aware of that. In spite of all problems between Turkey and the US, our strategic relations are very strong. Maybe this statement would be awkward to some of us, because we know that there are many critical problems. Washington is not giving Gülen, leader of terrorist organization, to Turkey. And at the same time, Washington is now still arming the YPG, a branch of PKK. And we have the issue of S-400, Halkbank, and some other issues. But still, I say we have a strong relationship. Still, I insist on that, because if all these problems were with another country, this could be a disastrous. Still, we are trying to put some of the problems within the brackets and try to find some ground for cooperation and positive relationship. We want to open a new page. And I know that President Trump and President Erdogan have a good relationship at the level of leadership, but still, many of the problems are not solved. But Africa is a field, is a region that both capitals can work together, can cooperate together. To better relations, bilateral relations, to prosper them, you have to find a place to work together. And Africa can be this place. We know that Washington is shifting its orientation from Middle East to Pacific. But at the same time, of course, they cannot withdraw all of their forces from the Gulf or Middle East. And again, in Africa, Russia is trying to be involved more and more. China is there. So the next battlefield will be Africa. And if the US is searching for a viable partner in this region, Turkey is one of them, and maybe one of the few countries that are trying to project a new activism in this region. Turkey is in Somalia, Turkey is in Libya. Turkey can be conducting diplomatic and political initiatives in different parts of Africa. We know that in the last 10 years, Turkey is putting Africa on the agenda of foreign policy. So this is a new region that both Turkey and US can work together. And this will help to solve other problems that are put within the brackets.
Thank you very much. And this is the very final question. I want to thank for our panelists as well. It is 20 minutes past, but despite their busy schedule, they allow me to make it this panel a little longer. The final question about the US elections. So there will be elections in the 4 months. After 4 months, there will be elections. And what is Turkey's expectations from the US, from either from a Trump 2.0 term or a second term for Trump or a Biden presidency? What would be Turkey's expectations? And Mr. Minister, since you are the member of parliament as well, what would be the expectations of a Turkish parliamentarian from the new US Congress that would be in place in November?
Of course, it is up to the US citizens to decide on their administration, and we, of course, should respect to their decisions, whatever this decision is. We will see in December the decision of the US people. I mean, but we can make certain analysis and make certain assessments. Of course, Trump was quite successful in economy, and that has generated a lot of employment in the US in the past years, and that has given a stronger perspective for re-election. But after this COVID-19, the conditions are not the same as before. I mean, the economy has been affected quite negatively with this all events on COVID, and health issues are there, of course. By the way, I extend my condolences to US people on the lost souls during this COVID days. US has been affected quite deeply, actually, with this process, and economy is not in good shape. And there is also, on top of this, we have this racial discussions in US after this, police action against black US citizen. So the atmosphere is now quite different, and let us see what happens out of these discussions. Our leader, of course, President Erdogan, have quite positive relations with President Trump. They have frequent contacts, and they have very constructive dialogue between themselves, and that is good for US-Turkey relations, of course. But of course, we would expect similar attitudes from any US government. As I said, it is up to the US people to decide on their future, and whoever is president or the administration, Turkey-US relations are beyond, of course, specific administrations. We also have structural relations and state-to-state relations, and that will continue, of course.
Thank you very much. Professor Duran?
Well, I have the same feelings. I expect that American nation will triumph in these elections, and American people will choose the best for their future. And Turkish people and Turkish political elite would respect this choice. Well, for the Trump administration, the second term, and I believe that President Trump will be more properly situated to conduct new policies. He would be more empowered to choose different foreign policy options as a second-term president. And of course, this would be a continuation of his 4-year policies, global policies, towards China and other countries, but at the same time towards Turkey. And we know that our leaders have good relationship. And this will improve Turkey's and Turkey and US relations. But at the same time, some of the problems are so critical that without changing our perceptions or without changing US perception of Turkey, some of the problems would not be solved in the short term. But in the long term, even there are different strategic considerations, and I believe that the US would have to choose to work with Turkey. If a Democratic Party candidate would be the new president, then I think the internal problems would pose a problem, a risk to the new president, and he would be involved. If he's Biden, Biden would be involved with many of them. But at the same time, Biden would change the American policy towards a new global order and the relations with the allies in the Middle East, including Turkey. And I believe that this would create some problems and at the same time some opportunities, again, to work together. Because Turkey is geographically situated, critically situated country, and diplomatic relations are not based on our feelings. It is based on our strategic calculations and national calculations. And I believe that Turkey and the US would find their way to further their relations and solve the existing problems.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for Mr. Minister, and thank you very much, Professor Duran, for your time, and thanks for the participants. It is almost 3:30 now. We are ending the panel. I know there are a lot of questions, but hopefully it will be in our next panel. We will address those questions. On the 4th anniversary of July 15 coup attempt, we one more time remember those who lost their lives, and our prayers and thoughts are with the people who are injured and who are having significant traumas and health issues because of the attacks in July 15 coup attempt. And I want to thank for those who watch us on social media and those who joined our Zoom meeting. Thank you very much, and see you in our next panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.